The prison yard was on fire with screams. Inmates had seized weapons, knives carved from metal scraps, clubs made from pipes, anything they could find. A group of guards was forced to the ground, surrounded, hands tied, blood smeared across the concrete. The air was filled with the sound of boots stomping, glass shattering, and voices shouting, "This is our prison now!" The riot at Folsom Prison was in full swing. Prisoners stormed cell blocks, dragging hostages, while smoke poured from burning trash. A guard voice over the radio cracked with terror. "We're losing control." At that very moment, the gates to the yard burst open with another wave of inmates charging forward, weapons raised. And then silence just for a second. Everyone stared, waiting to see what would happen next. Just days before, the prison had been like a pot about to boil over. Folsom was packed with inmates from every background, forced into tiny spaces with little food, poor medical care, and no hope. Many felt mistreated, especially along racial lines, which made tempers sharper than ever. Some prisoners whispered in the halls at night. Others wrote secret notes and passed them through the bars. A plan was forming, a violent one. Guards noticed the tension, but most thought it was the usual prison talk. They didn't know the storm was only hours away. On a hot April morning, the yard filled with men. At first, it looked like another routine day, but then a fight broke out. Two inmates clashed and others quickly joined. Instead of breaking apart, the fight grew larger, spreading like wildfire across the yard. Guards rushed in to stop it, but they were outnumbered. Inmates grabbed makeshift weapons hidden in their clothes. Knives flashed in the sun. Within minutes, the fight turned into a full-blown revolt. Guards were dragged down, beaten, and taken hostage. Fires broke out inside cell blocks. Beds and papers were set ablaze. Smoke curled out of barred windows as prisoners smashed furniture to make weapons. The once controlled prison was now chaos. Some inmates cheered as guards were tied up. Others hid in fear, not wanting to be part of the violence, but trapped in the middle of it. The sound of keys jangling and locks being forced open echoed across the prison. A group of guards was cornered against a wall. Inmates tied their hands and pushed them down, shouting threats. One guard begged for calm, but the crowd only grew louder. Prisoners saw the hostages as bargaining chips, a way to control the outside world. For the guards, it was terror. Every second felt like their last. Not all inmates agreed. Some wanted to use the riot to demand better conditions. Others just wanted revenge. Fistfights broke out even among prisoners. But the louder voices, the ones calling for blood, drowned out the rest. The yard was now divided between those who wanted to negotiate and those who wanted destruction. Meanwhile, outside Folsom's massive stone walls, police and state officials scrambled. Families of guards rushed to the gates, begging for news. Helicopters hovered overhead, watching the smoke rise. California's leaders demanded action, but no one dared storm the prison. Not yet. The world outside could only watch as Folsom became a battlefield inside. Back in the yard, prisoners dragged the hostages forward. A leader shouted over the chaos, demanding to speak with officials. Guards on the wall aimed rifles, but held their fire. Everyone froze. And then, without warning, an inmate raised a knife high over a hostage's head. The yard fell silent, waiting for the blade to fall. The yard froze as the inmate's knife hung in the air. Then, with a scream, he brought it down. The hostage collapsed, blood spilling across the concrete. Gasps and cheers erupted from the crowd. Guards on the wall shouted into radios. The riot had crossed a line. Now there was no turning back. Officials rushed to the gates with bullhorns, demanding the release of hostages. Inmates shouted back, listing demands: better food, fair treatment, and medical care. But after the killing, the state refused to give in. Tension grew hotter by the minute. The prisoners had made their point, but the cost would be deadly. Inside the cell blocks, chaos spread. Fires burned through wooden bunks. Windows shattered as inmates hurled debris. Some cheered the bloodshed. Others begged for it to stop. The air was thick with smoke, screams, and the pounding of fists on steel doors. Outside, heavily armed officers gathered. They strapped on helmets, raised shields, and loaded tear gas canisters. Radios crackled. "We move at dawn." The families at the gates cried as troopers marched toward the walls, knowing the fight inside would be brutal. As the sun rose, smoke billowed from Folsom. Then came the thunder of boots. Tear gas rained down into the yard. Officers in riot gear stormed through gates, shields clanging, batons raised. Inmates scattered, choking and blinded. Shouts of "Down! Down!" echoed through the prison. Amid the chaos, troopers reached the guards still alive. They pulled them to safety, dragging them through clouds of gas. Some stumbled, others collapsed in relief. One guard cried as fresh air hit his face. But not all survived. Blood and bodies were left behind in the smoke. Inmates who refused to surrender fought with desperation. Makeshift knives slashed, pipes swung, and fists flew. Officers struck back with shields and batons, forcing prisoners against walls. The prison roared with violence until finally, the resistance broke. The yard was littered with debris, smoke, and silence. By nightfall, order was restored. Fires were out, weapons confiscated, and inmates locked back in cells. But the scars remained. Several guards were dead. More inmates lay lifeless. The walls of Folsom carried black marks of fire, and the ground still held stains of blood. The Folsom Riot shocked California and the entire country. It sparked debates about overcrowding, racial inequality, and safety inside prisons. For guards, it was a memory of fear. For inmates, it was a memory of fury. For the public, it was a reminder that even the most secure walls could not hold back despair forever. News of the riot spread across the country. Other states watched closely, realizing their prisons faced the same dangers. The Folsom Revolt was not just about one prison in California. It was a warning to America that broken systems could explode anywhere at any time. Years passed, and the prison was repaired. But for those who lived through April 1970, the memory remained. Guards remembered the fear of being overpowered. Inmates remembered the smoke, the noise, and the chaos. Families remembered the long hours outside the walls, waiting for news. As silence returned to the prison, one question hung heavy in the air. Was this the end, or only the beginning of something worse?